On June 19, 1953, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were executed in the United States, becoming the first American civilians to be put to death for espionage during peacetime. Convicted of passing atomic secrets to the Soviet Union, their trial and execution took place at the height of the Cold War. A time of intense fear and suspicion of communist influence in America, the Rosenberg case remains one of the most controversial episodes in American history, raising questions about justice, due process, and the role of ideology in the legal system. This narrative explores the events leading up to the Rosenbergs' arrest, their trial and execution, and the lasting impact of their case on American society and politics.
Julius Rosenberg was born on May 12, 1918, in New York City to a family of Russian Jewish immigrants. He became politically active in his youth, joining the Young Communist League while studying electrical engineering. Ethel Greenglass, born on September 28, 1915 in New York, was also involved in leftist political activities and met Julius through their shared interests. The two married in 1939 and were devoted to each other and to their political beliefs. During World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union were allies against Nazi Germany, but the alliance was fraught with distrust. After the war, as tensions between the two superpowers escalated into the Cold War, the U.S. government became increasingly concerned about the possibility of Soviet espionage. This fear intensified in 1949 when the Soviet Union successfully tested its first atomic bomb. Years earlier than American officials had anticipated, the sudden Soviet nuclear breakthrough led to the conclusion that espionage had played a role in their accelerated atomic program, and the hunt for spies began.
In 1950, the U.S. government arrested Klaus Fuchs, a German-born physicist who had worked on the Manhattan Project, the secret American program to develop the atomic bomb. Fuchs confessed to passing atomic secrets to the Soviets and implicated others, including a U.S. Army engineer named Harry Gold and Julius Rosenberg's brother-in-law, David Greenglass, who had also worked on the Manhattan Project. David Greenglass, under pressure from investigators and facing his own charges of espionage, testified that he had provided atomic information to Julius Rosenberg, who then passed it to Soviet agents. He claimed that Ethel was involved in the conspiracy by typing up the notes her husband delivered to the Soviets. Based largely on Greenglass's testimony, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were arrested in the summer of 1950 and charged with espionage. The arrests of the Rosenbergs came at a time of rising anti-communist sentiment in the United States, spearheaded by Senator Joseph McCarthy's campaign to root out communist influence in American institutions. The Rosenberg case quickly became a symbol of the era's paranoia and the perceived threat of domestic communist subversion.
The trial of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg began on March 6, 1951, in New York City. It was a sensational affair, covered extensively by the media and watched closely by the public. The prosecution, led by Irving Sapol, portrayed the Rosenbergs as traitors who had conspired to help the Soviet Union build an atomic bomb, thus endangering the security of the United States and its allies. The case against Julius Rosenberg was stronger, supported by documents and testimony from Harry Gold, David Greenglass, and other witnesses. However, the evidence against Ethel was more tenuous, relying heavily on Greenglass's claim that she had typed up the stolen information. There were no direct documents or evidence linking her to the espionage, leading many to believe that her role was exaggerated to pressure Julius into confessing or naming other conspirators. The defense, led by attorney Emanuel Bloch, argued that the case was built on the unreliable testimony of witnesses who had been coerced or were seeking to reduce their own sentence. Bloch also emphasized the lack of concrete evidence against Ethel, and questioned the fairness of the trial, which was conducted in an atmosphere of fear and anti-communist hysteria. On March 29, 1951, after a brief deliberation, the jury found both Julius and Ethel Rosenberg guilty of conspiracy to commit espionage. Judge Irving Kaufman, in a dramatic sentencing, condemned the Rosenbergs to death, stating that their actions had altered the course of history to the disadvantage of our country and caused the Korean War, which was raging at the time, to be protracted. His harsh sentencing underscored the intense emotions surrounding the case.
So the Rosenbergs' death sentences sparked international outcry and a vigorous campaign to save their lives. Supporters argued that the evidence, particularly against Ethel, was insufficient to justify the death penalty, and that the Rosenbergs were being punished not just for espionage but for their political beliefs. Prominent figures, including Albert Einstein, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Pope Pius XII, called for clemency, while protests and demonstrations were held around the world. Despite these appeals, the U.S. government, under the administration of President Harry S. Truman and later President Dwight D. Eisenhower, refused to intervene. The Supreme Court, after multiple reviews, declined to overturn the convictions or commute the sentences. The Justice Department insisted that the Rosenbergs had been part of a significant spy ring that had caused irreparable harm to U.S. national security. Ethel's case, in particular, became a focal point of debate. Many believed that she was being used as a lever to force Julius to cooperate, and that her death sentence was a miscarriage of justice. Even David Greenglass, years later, admitted that his testimony against Ethel was false and given under pressure to protect his own wife, Ruth, who had also been involved in the espionage activities.
On the evening of June 19, 1953, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were executed in the electric chair at Sing 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 prison in Ossining, New York. Julius was executed first and Ethel followed shortly after. It was reported that it took 3 shocks to kill Ethel, a grim and painful end that added to the controversy surrounding her role and punishment. The execution of the Rosenbergs left a profound mark on American society and international perceptions of U.S. justice. Many saw their deaths as a product of Cold War paranoia and anti-Semitism, while others believed they had received a fair trial and just punishment for their betrayal. The case continued to polarize public opinion for decades, symbolizing the deep divisions in American society over issues of security, civil liberties, and the fear of communism. So in the years following the execution, new evidence emerged that confirmed Julius's involvement in espionage but cast further doubt on Ethel's role. Declassified Soviet archives and the release of the Venona Decrypts, a series of secret communications between Soviet intelligence agencies, revealed that Julius had indeed been a Soviet agent. However, these documents also suggested that Ethel's participation was minimal, reinforcing the view that she was prosecuted more for her association with Julius than for her own actions.
The case of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg remains one of the most contentious and debated episodes in American history. Their trial and execution symbolized the intense fear and hysteria of the McCarthy era, a time when the perceived threat of communism led to widespread suspicion and the erosion of civil liberties. The Rosenberg story has been the subject of numerous books, films, and plays, reflecting ongoing interest in the case and its implications for justice and political freedom. The execution of the Rosenbergs left a deep scar on American society, raising troubling questions about the balance between national security and individual rights. It serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of political persecution and the potential for miscarriages of justice when fear and ideology are allowed to influence the legal system. For their children, Michael and Robert Meeropol, the legacy of their parents' trial and execution has been a lifelong burden and mission. They have worked tirelessly to clear their mother's name, advocating for a reassessment of her case and seeking to raise awareness about the broader injustices of the Cold War era.
The execution of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg stands as a stark reminder of the complexities and dangers of the Cold War period. So their trial and execution, fueled by fear and ideology, continue to spark debate and reflection on issues of justice, civil liberties, and the influence of politics on the legal process. As we remember the Rosenbergs, we are reminded of the importance of vigilance in protecting the principles of fairness and due process, even in times of national crisis.